Let's talk about Blinded by the Light, which is the new film by Gurinder Chadha. Now, she made her name with coming-of-age movies. Bend It Like Beckham, of course, in 2002, and Angus Thongs and Perfect Snogging in 2008. Massively underrated, I think. Bend It Like Beckham was obviously this enormous cultural happening when it came out. I think it was made on less than 4 million, and it ended up making 11 million in the UK. Sort of era-defining in its own way.
Yeah.
And also discovered Parminder Nagra and Keira Knightley as well. And then Angus Thongs as well had this really great track record of Aaron Taylor-Johnson was in that film. That was his first the first time I remember noticing him, certainly. Georgia Groom, who is terrific, I mean, particularly in that film, but she's again was a great talent find. So this is something that Gurinder Chadha does well, and it feels to me, because of her last two films, she did a kind of a prestigious period drama called Viceroy's House, and this horror comedy, It's a Wonderful Afterlife, for the last two films before this. This feels more like she's back on territory that she knows and kind of intrinsically understands. It's an adaptation of a memoir by the journalist Sarfraz Manzoor about growing up in Luton in the 1980s and 90s. And the extent to which, this is the part that the film really focuses on, the extent to which the discovery of the music of Bruce Springsteen inspires him to pursue his dream to become a writer. Now, as the child of a Pakistani immigrant family, writing is not really an option that feels open to him. His father, who is brilliantly played by Kulvinder Gier, who was one of the leads in Goodness Gracious Me back in the day alongside Sanjeev, is very intent on me saying, I've given you so much freedom. You could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you could be an estate agent, but there's this sense that you have to do something that is conspicuously valuable with your life as an immigrant, as a new generation immigrant. You have to be seen to be being useful. And a writer, I'm sorry to say, people don't generally think of that as something that your job entails. So when Javed is at school, Javed's played by a virtual newcomer to the screen called Vivek Kalra, who, again, I think shows Gurinder Chadha's expertise at pinpointing these young actors with incredibly bright futures, because he is just a charisma beacon in this. He is at school and chewing over this idea that writing is something that fires him up, and but seems out of his reach, when a Sikh friend who's played by Aaron Fagura sits down at the cafeteria and gives him a Bruce-inspired pep talk, and here it is.
All right.
And we writing? Nothing. An essay?
Already? Are you a SWAT or something?
Nah, just a diary. So, tell me about the boss. Bruce, the direct line to all this true in the world. Seriously? What does he know about our world? Guard these with your life, yeah?
So he gives them these two classic Springsteen albums on cassette tape. And that evening, I think it is the evening of the famous Michael Fish hurricane, where he predicted this was going to be a small blustery evening, and instead Britain was rattled by these gale force winds. Javed goes outside and listens to these Springsteen songs on his Walkman, and has this life-changing experience. And the way in which it's staged, I think, brilliantly captures how music affects you at that age, because he's standing in this storm. The papers of his writing that he's really depressed about, he's brought out of the house with him, and are blowing around him. And then with what I assume was some floodlight strength overhead projector. And it's that way, like back in primary school when someone would walk across the front of the classroom and the teacher's writing would ripple across their face. This technology, I'm sure, has been superseded many times over now. But, back in the 1980s, this is how, things went up on the overhead projector.
Yeah.
These lyrics are blasted up on these brick walls of the cul-de-sac and right across him. And it's like he is living inside the song in that moment. And that is, to me, that is the absolute peak of the film, because it identifies how you listen to music at that age and how it can inspire you when it's been written by someone as well who is, he's not, the comparison is drawn between Bury Park and Asbury Park, which is where Springsteen comes from. This sense that he's writing for blue-collar America, but somehow the plight of his imagined listeners has so much in common in strange ways with a British Pakistani kid living in Luton. I think the location of the film in Luton is really important. It opens actually on a sign of London is
One
that
way, yeah.
The North is that way. So these two very exciting cultural hubs in the UK. and Luton is in the middle that's kind of neither here nor there. And there's a sense that when he's talking to his friend, his girlfriend, this impossibly glamorous figure, is from St Albans and works in HMV. I mean, that's the kind of height of sophistication. She actually, Javid's also not particularly successful on the romantic front as well. There's a really beautifully written conversation where his friends explain to his girlfriend, oh, he's never had a girlfriend before. And she says, oh, is it against your religion? And he says, no.
I also think as well, just that going about that thing about now you would never be able to have that in terms of, you know, a kid not understanding who Bruce Springsteen is, because now, you know, to be able to find out who someone is, you literally go to a computer and type in their name.
Of course, and Springsteen
so
at that
beautiful.
point, he had a back catalogue that could be discovered. So look, I think this is what works incredibly well about the film. First of all, Javid's internal experience of this music, the way in which it inspires him to pursue his writing, I find very moving. The particular sense of place and time is very well evoked as well. And I'm not just talking about, you know, custard and jam sponge in the cafeteria. There's this idea that the National Front are on the streets, you know, there's a time of political and economic turmoil. And the parallels to today are there if you want to see them, but they're not kind of heavily overemphasized. So that I thought worked very well. I thought the chemistry between Javid and his father as well was really well done. This idea that when you move to a new country, as I was saying, you need to feel conspicuously useful. And to be able to pursue a career like writer, or even, you know, in a band, as a singer, a guitarist, whatever, you have to almost make like a second emigratory leap in your mind that I feel comfortable enough in my new place that I can do this kind of thing that's not going to be seen to be, oh, I'm a good citizen. So that was beautifully done as well. And I have to say, you know, stuff that I'd forgotten about that period, that I've had the privilege to forget about that period. Now, I remember kids at school boasting about putting horrible things through Asian families' letterboxes, and that had completely evaporated from my mind. But that's there in the film, and when you see it, it reminds you, you know, this is more recent than we would like to think.
Yeah. Even this kind of smaller characters in this, I think, are absolutely beautifully and brilliantly written. Like David Heyman, who plays this
the next door neighbour who fought in the Second World War.
Who's just, it's, you know, in terms of the kind of like that stereotypes and how she plays with that and what she's given him as a character, I think is a beautiful role.
I think in that case it works. This is actually connected to where I think the film slightly struggles, is that it's trying to squeeze so much in about the period beyond. I mean, this has been adapted from an entire memoir, you know, so it's a lot to pack in. And all of this kind of cultural texture, there's a point about 2/3 of the way through the film that I felt it was kind of piling on too much and getting very frantic about what it needs to say. There's Javid's little sister who goes to this daytime nightclub event in order to have a party under the radar with, you know, that her parents don't notice. She suddenly becomes an incredibly important character in the film for 10 minutes and then kind of vanishes again. And I sort of feel almost that's its own story that's worth telling.
Yeah.
And this film would be stronger for not having covered it. There's also an element of cringe with some of the musical numbers that I found quite tricky to handle. I think when you look at recent films that have explored this idea of, you know, classic pop or country songs, people bursting into song, Wild Rose handled it very well by having its main character, obviously, an aspiring professional singer. So you can have her belting out big musical numbers in the middle of the film and it makes sense. Rocket Man, for example, as well, is taking place in this heightened imaginary recounting of Elton John's life. So you can have people breaking into big song and dance numbers in it. I'm not sure Blinded by the Light ever works out how it wanted to stage those numbers, because you have the Bruce Springsteen tracks playing as is, and you have the characters singing along to them, and their voices are sort of heard in the mix, but not really. And people in the background are sort of dancing along, but not really. And there's little allusions to the dancing sequences in The Breakfast Club, but not really.
I liked that bit along the street. And I also liked the bit in the cafe where it was their way of kind of standing up for themselves.
Yeah, so I love the idea, but I think the execution, to me, it just felt too cringy. I think you either have to go for it absolutely hell for leather, make it into a dance number like Rocket Man.
Sunshine on Leith.
Sunshine on Leith, exactly. And it's strange that, you know, Britain is not a country known for making movie musicals, but there's been quite a substantial crop recently. And I think Blinded by the Light never finds a way to bring the music out of Javid's head and into the real world in a way that didn't make me think when I was watching it. So that to me was the starting point, and also the fact that so much is being piled in. But I think the core of the story, the relationship with the father, the sense that when you emigrate somewhere new, you have to make a second mental emigration to feel fully at home there. And his personal experience of the music and how it feels to be a teenager and to be inspired by someone on the other side of the planet making music that wasn't for you, but somehow is for you,
Yeah.
is absolutely watertight and unimpeachable.